There was a drawer in her bedroom that had not closed properly for years. She knew exactly how to manage it. Lift the handle slightly, push with the left hand, then, just before it caught, press one knee against the bottom corner. It was one of those small inconveniences that quietly becomes part of a house. Like a door that has to be pulled before it can be locked, a tap that must be turned a little further than it should, a floorboard everyone learns not to step on. Eventually, you stop noticing that something is broken. You simply learn how to live around it. One afternoon, the drawer refused even this arrangement. She pushed harder. Something inside resisted. So she pulled the drawer completely out and tipped its contents onto the bed. And there it was. Not clutter exactly, more like sediment. The things a life leaves behind when nobody's paying attention. A purse with a broken strap. Two watches with dead batteries. A single glove. Old receipts. Three photographs. A pair of earrings. A birthday card. A key whose door she could no longer remember. And beneath everything else, his sunglasses, her father's old Ray-Bans. She recognized them before she had properly picked them up. The dull, gold frame, rectangular lenses, a little heavier than the sunglasses people wore now. They had been fashionable then, she remembered that. More than fashionable, perhaps. They belonged to a particular version of her father. The Air Force years. The man who left the house in uniform. The man who stood straighter than other men seemed to stand. The man she had known first not as someone who could grow old, but simply as her father. She held the glasses by one arm. There are objects that become so closely associated with a person that seeing them without the person feels almost wrong. His sunglasses had belonged on his face, behind the windscreen of a car, outside in the hard afternoon sun, on journeys when she was young enough to sit in the back and assume that wherever her father was taking them, they would arrive safely. She turned them over in her hands. The gold had dulled. There were tiny scratches on the lenses, and suddenly she could see him wearing them. Not the father who grew older, not the hands that eventually became less steady, not the man whose body, like everybody, had to surrender things one by one. The younger one, the one she had once looked up at. Perhaps that is one of the cruelties of growing older. You live long enough to remember your parents young, and then you live longer still, until sometimes you become older than the version of them you remember most clearly. As children, we think our parents arrive in the world already as our parents. We don't understand that they had faces before us, clothes they liked, friends we never knew, private disappointments, ambitions, vanities, songs, things they feared, things they never told us. There was once a young man behind these sunglasses who did not yet know most of what his life would bring him. He did not know all the houses he would live in, all the people he would worry about, all the things he would lose. He did not know what his children would become. He did not know that decades later, one of them would sit on the edge of a bed, holding his old Ray-Bans and trying, for a few seconds, to find him again. She folded the arms carefully. Perhaps this is why, as we grow older, throwing things away becomes complicated. We are not always keeping objects. Sometimes we are keeping entrances, a pair of sunglasses, a recipe written on the back of an envelope, a voicemail we cannot delete, a sweater nobody wears, a handwriting that suddenly becomes precious because the hand itself is gone. Small doors into rooms that no longer exist. She placed the sunglasses beside her. They would stay. Then she picked up the birthday card. The handwriting belonged to someone who was still alive. That was different. There are people we lose to death. There are people we lose while they continue living. Nobody teaches us how to grieve the second kind. There is no funeral, no condolences, no socially acceptable period in which people speak softly to you and understand why you are distracted. The person simply continues somewhere else, eating breakfast, checking messages, laughing, growing older, perhaps passing within a few miles of your house. And you are expected to behave as though nothing has died. She opened the card. The message inside was affectionate, unmistakably so. For years, she had occasionally taken it out and read it. Not often, only on certain days. Days when the present had become so cold that she needed evidence that she had not imagined the warmth. That was the part she had never admitted to herself. She had kept proof. Proof that once she had mattered. Proof that someone had once looked at her with tenderness. Proof that she had not invented an entire chapter of her own life. She read the card again, and something occurred to her that had never occurred to her before. The card was true, and what happened later was also true. One did not cancel the other. Perhaps that had been her mistake. For years, she had been trying to decide which version of the story was real. The love or the hurt. The closeness or the distance. The person she remembered or the person they eventually became. As though human beings must remain consistent for our memories to be legitimate. But people are capable of giving us tenderness and injury with the same hands. Families can contain loyalty and cruelty at the same table. A marriage can contain years that were real and years that were unbearable. A childhood can be loved without being idealized. Someone can fail you terribly without every good thing that came before becoming a lie. And perhaps this is why some memories refuse to settle. We keep putting them on trial, calling the witnesses again, reconstructing conversations, presenting evidence. If I had said this, if they had understood that, If somebody had seen what really happened, surely, eventually, there must be a verdict. But there are trials that continue only because the courtroom inside us has never been closed. She looked at the objects covering the bed. So many things waiting to be decided. Keep, throw away, forgive, remember, forget. She realized she had spent much of her life believing these were the only choices. But perhaps there was another one. To remember without returning. She began sorting. The receipts went first, then the broken purse, the watches, the glove, the mysterious key. She hesitated over the birthday card, then folded it carefully and placed it beside her father's sunglasses. She would keep it. This surprised her. She had imagined that becoming stronger would mean throwing it away. But destruction is not always freedom. Sometimes, throwing something away is merely another way of fighting with it. She did not need to punish the past. She only needed to stop asking it for a different ending. The card could remain a card. The good day could remain a good day. The person could remain someone she had once loved. Nothing had to be rewritten. Nothing had to be restored. By evening, half the contents of the drawer were gone. She returned what remained: the earrings, a few photographs, her father's sunglasses, the birthday card. Then she pushed the drawer closed. It slid in without resistance. She stood looking at it. Such a small thing. A drawer closing. And yet she thought of all the ways human beings become accustomed to resistance. We push, we adjust, we accommodate, we learn exactly where to press. We become so skilled at living around what hurts that sometimes we forget to ask why it must remain that way. There are people doing this with entire lives, maintaining relationships that exist mostly in memory, rehearsing conversations with people who are no longer listening, carrying accusations nobody's still making, defending themselves before invisible juries, waiting for someone to finally understand what they did, waiting for the apology, waiting for the explanation, waiting for the past to return and behave better. Years can disappear this way, not dramatically. That is what makes it dangerous. A life is rarely lost all at once. It disappears bit by bit. 10 minutes replaying a conversation, an afternoon checking whether somebody called, a Sunday spoiled by something said on Thursday, a beautiful morning spent arguing with someone who isn't even in the room, until one day you realize that the person who hurt you has not been present for years, but you have continued giving him a chair. She switched off the bedroom light, then stopped. For a moment, she wanted to pull the drawer open again, just to make sure everything was there. The sunglasses, the card, the photographs, her little archive of evidence. But she didn't. She walked downstairs instead. Outside, somebody was mowing a lawn. A car door slammed. A dog barked twice and stopped. Nothing profound was happening, and perhaps that was the point. Life had not been waiting for her to understand it. It had continued. through every disappointment, every absence, every unanswered question. Morning after morning had arrived without asking whether yesterday had been resolved. She went into the kitchen and filled the kettle, and standing there listening to the water begin to heat, she understood something very small. Perhaps we do not move forward because we have finally made peace with everything behind us. Perhaps we move forward because eventually we understand that peace is not an agreement with the past. It is a decision to stop negotiating with it. Upstairs, in the dark bedroom, the drawer remained closed. Inside it were things she loved, things she had lost, things she no longer understood. They were still hers. They simply no longer needed the whole room.